3 ships, 3 different flags, 3 separate attacks, all in one day, all in the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps naval forces struck a Thai-flagged bulk carrier, a Japanese-flagged container ship, and a Liberian-flagged cargo vessel in a 24-hour period on March 11, 2026. Not accidents, deliberate attacks. And here's what makes this different from every previous Iranian strike on shipping. The IRGC naval commander issued a public statement immediately after the attacks, declaring that any ship wanting to pass through the Strait of Hormuz must obtain Iran's approval or face attack. Not a warning, a policy. Oh, Iran is now enforcing a de facto naval blockade through direct military force against neutral commercial shipping. And the 3 burning vessels are proof that Iran means exactly what it says. The first attack happened at 6:47 a.m. local time. The Mayuree Naree, a Thailand-flagged bulk carrier carrying construction materials from Khalifa Port in the UAE, was navigating in waters near the Strait of Hormuz when struck by what the Thai Navy described as projectiles of unknown origin. The ship caught fire, crew abandoned vessel, 13 sailors rescued by Omani Coast Guard, 2 confirmed dead. The ship is still burning, as of this report. The second attack occurred at 2:15 p.m. The ONE Majesty, a Japanese-flagged container ship, sustained damage to its stern while anchored in the Persian Gulf approximately 52 nautical miles from the Strait of Hormuz. The ship was not moving, it was anchored. And Iran struck it anyway. The attack damaged the vessel's rudder and propulsion systems. No casualties reported, but the ship is now unable to maneuver under its own power. The third attack happened at 9:33 p.m. A Liberian-flagged cargo vessel, identity not yet publicly confirmed, was struck while approaching the strait from the Gulf of Oman side. The vessel caught fire. Crew evacuated. Status unknown. 3 ships, 3 flags, 3 attacks. 24 hours. And an IRGC statement saying, this is now the policy. Get Iran's approval to transit Hormuz or get attacked. IRGC Naval Commander Alireza Tangsiri issued the statement through Iranian state-run press, TV. Any ship aiming to pass through the Strait of Hormuz must obtain Iran's approval or face attacks. Read that sentence again. Iran is declaring that commercial vessels from any nation must request permission from Iranian authorities before transiting the Strait of Hormuz. This is not a temporary war measure. This is not retaliation for specific hostile acts. This is Iran asserting sovereignty over international waters and claiming the authority to grant or deny passage to commercial shipping through the world's most critical oil choke point. International maritime law is unambiguous on this point. The Strait of Hormuz includes territorial waters belonging to Iran and Oman, but it also includes international shipping lanes protected by the right of transit passage. Transit passage means ships of any nation can pass through straits used for international navigation without seeking permission from coastal states. This is foundational to global maritime commerce. Iran just announced they're ignoring that principle, and they backed up the announcement by striking 3 ships in one day to prove they have both the capability and the willingness to enforce the new policy through military force. The strategic message is unmistakable. We control access to the Persian Gulf. Every oil tanker, every LNG carrier, every container ship, every bulk carrier, if you want to pass through Hormuz, you ask Iran first. And if Iran says no, you don't pass. Thailand, Japan, Liberia, 3 different flag states, all attacked in the same 24-hour period. This was not random targeting. This was deliberate selection to send specific messages to specific audiences. Thailand represents Southeast Asian shipping. Thai vessels carry goods throughout the region. Thailand is not involved in the Iran war. Thailand has no military forces in the Gulf. Thailand maintains neutral diplomatic relations with Iran. And Iran attacked a Thai vessel anyway. The message to Southeast Asian nations: your neutrality does not protect your ships. Your non-involvement in the war is irrelevant. If your vessels enter Hormuz without our permission, we will strike them. Japan represents East Asian economic powerhouses. Japan imports 90% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Japanese shipping companies operate some of the largest container fleets in the world. Japan is a U.S. ally but has not participated directly in military operations against Iran. And Iran attacked a Japanese vessel anyway. The message to Japan and South Korea: your economic dependence on Gulf oil gives you a choice. Negotiate with us for passage rights or watch your energy imports stop. Liberia represents flags of convenience. Approximately 11% of the global merchant fleet flies Liberian flags despite having no operational connection to Liberia itself. Ships register under Liberian flags for tax and regulatory advantages. Many vessels carrying oil from the Gulf to Asian and European markets use Liberian registration. And Iran attacked a Liberian-flagged vessel anyway. The message to the entire global shipping industry: we don't care what flag you fly. We don't care who owns the ship. If you transit Hormuz without approval, you're a target. By hitting 3 different flags in one day, Iran demonstrated that the new approval requirement applies universally. No nation is exempt. No registration provides protection. Every ship entering Hormuz is subject to Iranian authority. Subscribe for analysis that connects military strikes to global economic impact. Drop your country below. How is this conflict affecting your region? The Strait of Hormuz is 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. 20% of the world's oil supply passes through that 21-mile gap. There is no alternative route. Persian Gulf oil producers, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Iraq, Iran, Qatar, Bahrain, can only export their oil through Hormuz, or via pipelines that have far less capacity than shipping. Saudi Arabia has the East-West pipeline that can move crude from eastern oil fields to Red Sea terminals, bypassing Hormuz. Capacity, 5 million barrels per day, but Saudi Arabia produces 10 million barrels per day. The pipeline handles half. The other half must go through Hormuz. The UAE built the Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline to bypass Hormuz. Capacity, 5 million barrels per day. The UAE produces 2 million barrels per day. The pipeline handles less than half. Kuwait has no pipeline bypass. Iraq's northern export pipelines through Turkey have limited capacity. Qatar's LNG exports go entirely through Hormuz. Bahrain has no alternatives. Do the math. Even with all bypass pipelines operating at maximum capacity, approximately 15 million barrels per day of oil and millions of tons of LNG must transit the Strait of Hormuz to reach global markets. There is no way to replace that volume using alternative routes. This geographic reality gives Iran perfect leverage. By controlling access to Hormuz, Iran controls access to 15 million barrels per day of oil that the global economy cannot function without. And the 21-mile width means Iran doesn't need a large navy to enforce control. Small fast attack boats, anti-ship missiles, naval mines, and drones are sufficient to make the strait dangerous enough that commercial shipping stops. The 3 ships struck in one day prove Iran has deployed those capabilities and is willing to use them against any vessel regardless of flag, ownership, or cargo. Here's where Iran's new policy creates an unsolvable problem for commercial shipping. Insurance. Maritime insurance underwriters base premiums on risk assessment. When a shipping lane has a 1% chance of attack, insurance is affordable. When the Iranian Navy is actively striking vessels and demanding pre-approval for transit, the risk calculation changes fundamentally. Lloyd's of London and other major maritime insurers are already treating Hormuz as a war risk zone. Premiums have increased 600% to 800% compared to pre-war levels, but those premium increases assumed Iranian attacks were targeting specific vessels based on cargo type or ownership connections to hostile nations. Random attacks against neutral ships assumed to be relatively safe. The 3 ships struck on March 11th just destroyed that assumption. Thai bulk carrier carrying construction materials, Japanese container ship at anchor, Liberian cargo vessel. None carrying military goods, none owned by nations participating in the war, all attacked anyway. Insurance underwriters now face a binary choice. Either stop covering Hormuz transits entirely or increase premiums to levels that make shipping economically impossible. When a bulk carrier pays $500,000 in insurance premiums for a single Hormuz transit, the economics of the voyage stop working. The cargo value doesn't justify the insurance cost. And here's the impossible situation Iran's approval policy creates. Even if a shipping company wanted to seek Iranian permission to transit, how do they do it? What office do they contact? What documentation is required? What approval timeline should they expect? What fees does Iran charge for granting passage? Iran hasn't specified any of these procedures, which means the approval policy is functionally unworkable even for companies willing to comply with it. You can't seek permission when there's no process for obtaining permission. The result? Shipping stops. Not because Iran is physically blocking every vessel, but because the combination of active attacks, approval requirements, and insurance unavailability makes commercial transit impossible. 15 million barrels of oil per day transit the Strait of Hormuz under normal conditions. At 115 per barrel, that's $1.725 billion in oil value per day. Per week, $12 billion. But oil is only part of the story. Liquefied natural gas from Qatar, the world's largest LNG exporter, transits Hormuz. Value, approximately $4 billion per week. Container ships carrying manufactured goods, electronics, machinery, and consumer products transit Hormuz. Value, approximately $3 billion per week. Bulk carriers transporting construction materials, grain, chemicals, and industrial inputs transit Hormuz. Value, approximately $1.5 billion per week. Total weekly value of commercial shipping. Through Hormuz, approximately $20 billion. When Iran makes that shipping route too dangerous or too complex to use, $20 billion per week in trade stops moving. Annually, that's more than $1 trillion in lost commerce. And the losses cascade. Oil that can't reach refineries means gasoline and diesel that can't be produced. LNG that can't reach power plants means electricity that can't be generated. Container ships that can't deliver goods means factories that can't get components and consumers who can't buy products. The economic disruption spreads across every sector in every country that depends on Gulf trade. Iran's strategy is elegant in its simplicity. We don't need to win the war militarily. We just need to make it economically unbearable for the global economy to continue functioning while the war persists. Eventually, political pressure on Western governments from their own populations experiencing fuel shortages, power outages, and economic contraction will force a settlement on terms favorable to Iran. The United States Navy is the most powerful maritime force in history. American destroyers, cruisers, submarines, and carrier strike groups dominate every naval engagement. If this were conventional naval warfare, the U.S. would destroy the Iranian Navy in 48 hours. But this is not conventional naval warfare. This is asymmetric naval harassment using weapons and tactics specifically designed to exploit American vulnerabilities. Iranian fast attack boats operate from dozens of bases along 1,500 miles of coastline. Each boat costs $500,000. Each carries anti-ship missiles or rocket-propelled grenades. U.S. ships can sink these boats easily. But Iran has hundreds of them, and building replacement boats costs a fraction of what it costs to keep American warships on station in the Gulf. Iranian anti-ship missiles launch from mobile trucks that hide in civilian areas, fire, and relocate before counterattack arrives. Each missile costs $100,000 to $500,000. U.S. air defenses can intercept most of them, but each interceptor costs $2 million to $4 million. The cost exchange ratio favors Iran. Iranian naval mines can be deployed by submarines, helicopters, small boats, or even disguised civilian vessels. Once deployed, mines create a threat that persists for years and requires expensive, slow, dangerous clearing operations. The U.S. can protect some commercial shipping through convoy escort operations. But there aren't enough U.S. warships to escort every commercial vessel transiting Hormuz. At peak traffic, 50 to 60 ships per day transit the strait. Escorting all of them requires 20 to 30 destroyers operating continuously. The U.S. doesn't have that many destroyers to dedicate to Hormuz escort duty while also conducting offensive operations against Iran and maintaining global naval presence elsewhere. And here's the unsolvable problem. Even if the UMS escorts every ship, insurance companies still won't cover the transits unless the U.S. Navy guarantees zero risk of attack. The Navy can't provide that guarantee. Which means even with escorts, insurance remains unavailable or prohibitively expensive. Iran's strategy exploits exactly this vulnerability. You cannot solve the Hormuz transit problem through military force alone. The economic and insurance dimensions require solutions that naval power cannot provide. If Iran successfully establishes the precedent that they can require permission for commercial shipping to transit the Strait of Hormuz, every other nation with control over maritime choke points will watch and learn. China controls the South China Sea and the approaches to the Malacca Strait. If Iran can demand approval for Hormuz transits, China can demand approval for South China Sea transits. Russia controls access to the Black Sea through the Bosporus and Dardanelles. Egypt controls the Suez Canal. Panama controls the Panama Canal. Every one of these choke points becomes vulnerable to the same strategy. Declare that permission is required for transit, enforce the requirement through military attacks on non-compliant vessels, and create insurance conditions that make unauthorized transit economically impossible. The global maritime commerce system depends on freedom of navigation through international waters and straits. That freedom rests on international law and the U.S. Navy's ability to enforce it. If Iran breaks the system in Hormuz and the U.S. cannot restore it, the precedent spreads globally. Within 5 years, commercial shipping could require navigating a patchwork of permission requirements, approval fees, and political negotiations with every coastal nation controlling strategic waterways. The efficiency and reliability that makes global trade possible disintegrates. 3 ships, 3 flags, 3 attacks. One day. And a declaration that Iran now controls who passes through the Strait of Hormuz. The Thai vessel is still burning. The Japanese ship is dead in the water. The Liberian vessel's status is unknown. And the IRGC naval commander just told every shipping company in the world that this is the new normal. Get Iran's approval to transit Hormuz, or get attacked. Your flag doesn't matter, your cargo doesn't matter, your neutrality doesn't matter. 20% of the world's oil supply just became subject to Iranian permission. And the 3 burning ships prove that permission will not be granted freely. Subscribe for analysis beyond the headlines. Drop your country. How does this affect you?